From Elden Ring to Horizon, open worlds are still the big showstoppers on the gaming landscape in 2022. But how do they stack up against the biggest game worlds ever made? It seems like as long as there have been people on E3 stages smiling slightly too much, there have also been massive environments behind them on big screens, and promises that this massive environment is 480 quintillion times bigger than in last year's game, Massive Environment 3. Also, Massive Environment 3 is getting a remaster and the Season 7 Battle Pass is live now.
Looking good.
And with Elden Ring turning up and slaying our hearts, showing us what you can really do with some open space and some absolutely fantastic game design, it got us thinking about space in general. Which games have pushed the envelope more than any others? Where do we have to go if we want to see the biggest virtual worlds ever created? And what games are they actually found in? So we found the 10 biggest ever. And if you just want to hear about them, you can skip to the timestamp in the description now. Before you do, however, make sure to subscribe to Logitech G and hit that notification bell so you never miss another video from us.
Just me, the car, and the road. Now that's joyriding.
First, let's talk about procedurally generated worlds. The big hitters in this category are games like Minecraft, Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, and Fuel. Instead of crafting every tile of world map by hand, the developers of these games used algorithms that could decide a certain level of variation from one square to the next, according to a bunch of variables. Using that tech instead of having to store all the data to describe every bit of the world, Minecraft can build worlds 8 times bigger than actual planet Earth. Fuel's 14,000 by 14,000 kilometer world is built the same way, as is that legendary old RPG Daggerfall, which always tops the big game world lists with its 209,000 square kilometer map. Then there are games that, just casually model entire universes, again using algorithms to build vast spaces on the fly. There are 18 quintillion planets in No Man's Sky, for example, and while we're pretty sure quintillion isn't even a word, we do believe there's a lot of planets in it. Elite Dangerous has our entire Milky Way waiting to be explored by spacecraft, and little-known Star Control 2 managed the same feat way back in 1992, albeit with a little bit less detail. Now we've tipped our hat to those vast game spaces and their mathematical wizardry, let's get to the more curated game worlds you can basically explore forever. We're starting with more of a context for the other massive spaces to come as much as anything else, and that's DayZ's 86.9 square miles of Eastern Bloc wilderness. There are other open worlds with larger maps who could have snuck here in its place, but DayZ makes it by virtue of every inch being explorable. It's also an area many of us know so well, starting on that beach by the main road, naked and shivering, and then working our way inland to the more loot-heavy cities. And since the game itself doesn't offer a map, you really have to pay attention to the geography, and Alt-Tab out to a map on your browser. If anyone's managed to get from one end of the island to the other in one life, tell us about it in the comments, because we're lucky if we survive a rain shower in this game. Codemasters used the Alaskan island of Kiska as a reference for Operation Flashpoint Dragon Rising's huge open-world map, including the topographical bumps and a giant volcano. Skyra, the in-game version, is 135 square miles of explorable terrain, and while a lot of open-world games cram in wildly different biomes next to each other, Dragon Rising keeps a slightly desolate, remote atmosphere throughout. Did it make the game better? Well, it certainly adds to the realism to be fighting on a landscape that doesn't feel made by a game designer, but it can also feel pretty lonely out here.
Support gunner, 100 meters east.
Ghost Recon Wildlands is all about infiltrating drug cartels unseen, using the kind of gadgets that make Jason Bourne look like Crocodile Dundee, then leaving in a pile of broken necks and broken cocaine supply lines without anyone being the wiser.
Spotting another tango.
It's set in Bolivia, a country famous for its natural beauty, rainforests, misty skies, and, well, less so for soldiers in shades zipping around on bikes like they're at the X Games. But it's hard to stay on task in the 170 square miles Wildlands gives you, because there's always a cliff that looks like it'd be amazing to dive off somewhere nearby, or a motocross trail that, okay, isn't gonna bust any Santa Blanca cartel members if you ride it really well, but will definitely give you goosebumps if you do.
I could say it comes with a job, but it doesn't get any easier. No, it doesn't.
Open world wasn't as much of a thing in the early noughties. At least not on the scale we're accustomed to now. We were all only just getting our heads around GTA games, and as people often like to remind us now, their maps were way smaller than we thought at the time. It was all smoke and mirrors. You could fit San Andreas in your downstairs toilet, but true crime streets of LA was something else. Its world map was 240 square miles big, and it came to PC in 2004. Think of that. A bigger explorable space than Ghost Recon Wildlands in an age before iPhones.
My God, what happened?
Haha, who the man?
Looking back, we can understand why Hideo Kojima was so mysterious about Death Stranding, because if he'd have just come clean and told us it was a long walk carrying parcels, we wouldn't have been quite as trigger-happy on the old pre-order button. That would have been a mistake though. It's the best long walk carrying parcels we've ever played.
I make deliveries, that's all.
With the Metal Gear Solid Auteur's trademark weirdness bubbling up through the story, and breathtaking scenery that reimagines USA as a moody morning in Iceland. There's 230 square miles of that breathtaking scenery, in fact, although it's not all traversable. In fact, figuring out what's traversable and what's not is a big part of the game, so we can forgive it for that.
Once there was an explosion. A bang which gave rise to life as we know it.
Rico, we only wanted you to instate a democratically elected leader and facilitate positive change. What did you go about tying up llamas and attaching civilians to helicopters for? The answer, obviously, is just 'cause. There's no real rhyme of reason to your methodology here, but that's sandbox gaming for you. Give a man a grappling hook, a mandate to make chaos, and a black shirt unbuttoned at least 3 buttons too low, and he'll inevitably make a huge mess. But that's basically fine because Just Cause 3's map is 400 square miles big. So even though, yes, granted, that village you just visited will never recover from the 5-minute rampage you subjected it to just for kicks, there are loads of others out there that are still fine.
Mario Frigo is your man.
Can you fly the helicopter?
Mario Frigo is not your man.
We're getting into contentious territory here with Final Fantasy XV, because technically its world map is 700 square miles big. That's massive. But this is where we can get lost splitting hairs, because actually only a tiny fraction of that is playable space. The rest of it is only to fly over and admire a scenery. So is it still game world? Does it exist, if only to be observed but never touched? These are philosophical questions beyond the remit of a games list video. But we will say this. Looks nice, doesn't it?
I think we can forget about hitching our way there.
You'll notice in these last few entries that as we get closer to the biggest open worlds ever, the numbers jump up exponentially. We've just gone from 700 square miles to 1,900 as we move into The Crew 2, a racing game that lets you flip between cars, bikes, planes and boats with a waggle of the right thumbstick. And taking a sightseeing tour of the United States at speeds an open-top bus driver can only dream of. It's not all totally accurate. We're pretty sure there isn't a hotel called Bond Cove on the Vegas Strip, for example, but it feels like an epic adventure to drive from one city to the next, and there's a surprising number of cool landmarks to take in along the way. Hang on, Guild Wars Nightfall? That can't be right, can it? A 2006 expansion for an MMO has the second biggest game map of all time. And yep, here we are. We've run the numbers, and the consensus is that it really does have 15,000 square miles of environment, or 65 Death Strandings if you prefer that unit of measurement. However, we're back to the debate about game map versus playable area again, because this is really more of a series of hubs, admittedly a lot of them, connected by fairly linear paths. To our knowledge, no one's totted up the actual amount of traversable terrain in this huge map. But in all likelihood, it would put this veteran MMO quite a bit down the list if they did. For now, let's just appreciate that a team of designers even conceived a fantasy land this big and detailed, regardless of how much of it we can step on.
We shall speak again of this at the Sunspear Great Hall. Of course. And always remember, you never fight alone.
So here we are in the biggest game world ever made, Earth. Feels almost anticlimactic, doesn't it? Until you really think about Flight Simulator 2020's version of our home planet. You can fly over your childhood home, do a few loop-de-loops over the airport you landed at for your first holiday, swoop dangerously over every major landmark you've ever seen, and land a prop plane on your dad's golf course. It's a tangible, incredibly detailed one-for-one recreation of our entire planet. Flight Sim 2020 achieves this by pulling in all the satellite data from Bing Maps, and then using deep learning AI to recognize different terrain types and then place 3D objects there accordingly. Trees go in forests, skyscrapers go in cities, amazing volcanic springs go in national parks, and so on. Planes being planes, we suppose you can't just go anywhere on the map from one place, because you'd run out of fuel, wouldn't you? But if you're prepared to concede a few airport stops, this is the biggest non-procedural world gaming gives you to explore.
Airbus tree, 20 contact ground on 121.9er.
And that concludes our whistle-stop tour of gaming's biggest destinations. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and turning on notifications by dinging the bell. Leave us a like if you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.
Well, that settles it then. Good luck, Rico.